Story 1. Mom kicked me out for her new family. Later, when she found out I'm successful, she showed up demanding college money for my siblings. When I refused, she hit me. So, for context, my mother had me when she was 20, and my biological father was never in the picture for me. My mom told me that he had never wanted to have kids with her, and since they were just together for a couple of months at the time when she got pregnant, she had given him the choice to leave, and he had taken her up on that offer. She told me that her breakup with him had been quite bitter, so she had decided not to take any child support from him, and he hadn't been willing to offer any either. So it was convenient for both of them to just never speak again. Thankfully, my grandparents were very supportive, and were always there for her. That's how she was able to complete her education, and then get a job. She dated a couple of men when I was younger, and then when I was around 8 years old, she finally started dating Harry. She used to work with him at some point, and they dated for almost 3 years before she got married to him. Harry and I got along well enough. It was not like he and I were super attached to each other, but he didn't hate me, and we were just cool with each other's presence in the house. 4 years after they got married, my mom got pregnant, and everyone was really happy about it, including me. In hindsight, I probably should have seen what was going to happen in the future, but I was too caught up in the belief that no matter what, my mom would always be there for me. After all, she had been through a lot of hardships while she was raising me, so she was obviously not going to let it all go to waste and abandon me. So even though we had started growing apart, and she had made it very obvious that she was distancing herself from me after she got married to Harry, I thought that it was probably just a temporary phase and things would get better again. So I tried my best to be there for her while she was pregnant, but she would always get very irritable whenever I was around. So I decided to make myself scarce just so it wouldn't bother her. But I guess I hadn't made myself invisible enough because 6 months after she gave birth to her twins, she and Harry told me that they wanted to have a serious chat with me. They told me that now that they had 2 kids to deal with, they couldn't have me in the house as well. I think I had just turned 16 at the time, so I was still a minor, and they couldn't legally kick me out without getting into trouble. So they tried to gently nudge me by telling me how hard it was becoming for them to support our whole big family on their limited income. I honestly don't think that 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 babies were impossible to support on the income of 2 web developers. They had been able to provide quite a comfortable lifestyle for us so far. It was obvious to me that they were bluffing, and they just wanted me out of the house. But even then I tried to make suggestions that would prevent that from happening because I really didn't want to move away. I tried to tell them that I would take up a job if money was the problem, but my mother told me that more than anything else, she wanted to save money and other resources for the kids who actually deserved it more at the time, referring to the twins. She didn't say that they needed this more, she said that they deserved to stay with them more than I did, and that was all that I needed to hear to help me make up my mind that I needed to get out of there, because I was clearly not wanted. They hadn't even told me where I should be going after I left. All they had done was nudge me in the right direction because they wanted me to go, and they knew that I had enough pride to realize that I was not wanted. So their plan worked. Technically, it wasn't even kicking me out in the real sense of the word since they hadn't forced me, but honestly, I would count it as the same thing, because they had pushed me into a corner where I had my back against the wall, and I felt like I simply had no other option. After I left that day, I headed straight to my grandparents' place, and they were quite unhappy about what my mother had done, but did not cut her off because they still wanted to be there for the twins. My grandparents were getting old, so it was obviously not an option for me to rely on them financially, and I had to get a part-time job at 16. I would see my mom and Harry occasionally when they would visit my grandparents with the kids, but they rarely ever asked about me, and even when they saw me around, they were mostly very formal with me. It didn't feel like they missed me at all, and they actually seemed quite happier without me living with them. Even my mother seemed way less irritable than she used to be, and it broke my heart, but I couldn't do anything about it. I stayed with my grandparents until it was time for me to start college, and even then, my mom had nothing to do with me, and I had to rely on a couple of friends to help me settle in my dorm. Since my grandparents were obviously not young or fit enough to be doing that, I had to take out a student loan. Even for that, I had to ask one of my relatives to be the co-signer, because my mom and Harry had declined for the same reason that they had kicked me out. They wanted to save their resources and their money for the future of their kids, since they had the twins pretty late in their lives. I was lucky that one of my uncles had come to my rescue and agreed to be the co-signer as long as I promised him that he would never have to actually pay any money. So, I worked throughout college alongside completing my education in order to make sure that I did not end up defaulting on any payments after I graduated, and would have a head start regarding money. After I started college, I pretty much had no contact with my mother anymore, and even at my graduation, it was just my grandparents who attended. My mom did not even bother to congratulate me. Then, after I graduated from college, I started working, and living separately because I did not want to be a burden on my aging grandparents anymore. It was very difficult for the first couple of years because I did not really earn a lot of money, but I had to cover rent, groceries, and utilities, and even start reducing my debt on my income while still making sure that I saved for the future. I think that was what I would actually refer to as limited income, but thankfully that's not the case anymore. I worked my way up in the company, and it was not easy. It took me a really long time, but I'm in a relatively comfortable position right now. I won't bore you guys with the details, but I'm pretty proud of how far I've come, especially considering the fact that I hardly had any help from anyone. I make a comfortable living, and quite unexpectedly, somehow, in spite of not being in touch with me for the past many years, my mom was able to find out about it. So, I'm almost 33 now, and I'm working in an upper management position in the same company that I started out in. I received this huge honor of getting promoted about 4 months back, and very few people knew about it, because I wanted to keep this private. One of the people that I did tell about this was my uncle, because I wanted to thank him for becoming a co-signer on my loan application back when I was struggling to find a way to cover my college expenses. From what I know, he recently met my mom and Harry at some family get-together and told her to get in touch with me so she could finally congratulate me after so many years of keeping me away from her because I was finally doing well in life. I'm sure that he had his heart in the right place, but it kind of backfired because she definitely did not reach out to me to congratulate me in any sense of the word. Anyway, the bottom line is that my mom found out, and she recently showed up at my house with Harry, demanding to speak with me. I've already mentioned that after I started college, I did not have any contact with her, and once I graduated, I decided that there was no point in hoping that someday my mom might come back to her senses and try to make things right with me. So, I blocked her everywhere as well and completely cut her out of my life. She did not seem any worse off either, honestly. I don't even think she noticed. I hardly kept in touch with anybody from my family apart from my grandparents, who already knew that I did not like talking about my mom, so they refrained from speaking to me about her. As for my uncle, I did not exactly keep in touch with him either, so I really had no idea that for the past couple of years, my mom and Harry had been doing really bad financially. I only found out about it recently when they showed up at my house and started telling me about how difficult everything had been for them. The only reason I had even let them in was because I had assumed that they were here to finally make things right with me. But I guess it was just wishful thinking. Instead of congratulating me on how well I was doing, they started off by talking about how they had heard from my uncle that I had received this huge promotion, and that I was one of the youngest people in such a position in my company right now. They were surprised that I hadn't told them anything about it. It was funny because I was surprised that they had expected me to even talk to them after so many years of no contact, let alone expect me to tell them good news about my life and my career. They even told me that they were quite disappointed that I had cut them out of my life just because they had decided that they wanted to be there for their babies more than me, since they needed their time, money, and resources more than I would have as a teenager. They said that they had expected me to be mature about the whole thing and understand why their priorities had changed, but instead, I had started distancing myself from them after I moved in with my grandparents. Instead of being supportive of their decisions, I don't even know why they would expect me to be supportive of their decision to kick me out of the house. But well, that's how they started off our meeting, after so many years, by trying to gaslight me into believing that I was somehow the bad guy for getting upset that they had kicked me out of the house so they could be alone with their babies. Then, they did not even give me a chance to talk about my side of things and quickly moved on to talk about how difficult the last couple of years had been for them. They started talking about how they had started their own business, but unfortunately, they had fallen flat on their faces since it failed to take off, and now they were trying to cover up their losses. But unfortunately, since the twins were also at an age where they needed to start thinking about colleges and stuff, they needed money to cover the expenses of 2 kids, and they needed it ASAP. That's when I finally started to realize why exactly they had come to me. Because they needed the money. They wasted no time in getting to the point and even tried to sugarcoat it by saying that initially, they had been quite offended when they found out that I had been doing so well and hadn't reached out to them yet. But I could make it up to them by funding my siblings' education. I simply could not believe the audacity of trying to make it sound like they were doing me a favor by letting me make it up to them by covering the college expenses of 2 kids I didn't even know anymore since I had left them behind in my past. So, I immediately told them that I was not going to be doing any of that, and it was downright offensive that they thought they could manipulate their way into something like this. I lost my temper with them, and reminded them that they were the reason I had to pay for college and work throughout my years in college, because they refused to help me out financially simply because they wanted to save for the future of their kids, since they deserved it more than I did, according to their opinion back then. I had never questioned it, nor had I ever bothered them after they made it clear that they wanted to prioritize their twins and not me. But now, since they had chosen who they wanted to prioritize, and even kicked me out and refused to stay in touch with me for so many years, they had no right to expect anything from me, let alone financial support. They didn't even have the right to expect me to speak to them anymore. I told them that since they had wanted to save their money and resources for the kids that actually deserved it, they could now use that very same money that they had saved by kicking me out to fund their college expenses instead of trying to emotionally manipulate me. Then I requested them to leave, because I was done with this interaction, and had nothing left to say to them anymore. It had been pretty stupid of me to allow them to enter my house in the first place, believing that maybe they had finally come to their senses and shown up to apologize to me for how they had treated me for so long. When I started getting at them and telling them to leave, they started getting offended as well and told me that it wasn't like I was all innocent in this situation. Their defense was that back when we had all been living together, I had always been very over-enthusiastic and over-involved in their lives, and that I used to get quite annoying. I don't even understand how that's a real problem that they had with me. I was literally a teenager, and I was only trying to stay connected with my family when they were drifting away from me. Then they started telling me that by rejecting their request right now, I was no better than them, because I was forgetting all those years that my mother had supported me and raised me on her own. This was my opportunity to make it up to her and help her out, but here I was, acting all ungrateful and disrespectful toward everything that they had done for me in the past. I thought that it was insanely dumb for them to bring that up, since back then I was literally a child. There was no way that I could have chosen not to rely on them. Even if I had wanted to be less of a burden on them, I still would have had to rely on them financially, and it wasn't like they were doing me a favor. As soon as they thought that I was old enough to handle stuff on my own, they nudged me into leaving home and essentially just kicked me out, and then refused to even acknowledge my existence for almost the next 18 years. Even after all of that, I couldn't understand how they had the audacity to demand that I help them out for everything that they had done for me in the past. Things got pretty nasty and personal in the argument after that, and I started threatening to call the cops if they did not immediately get off my property. So after a while, they did leave, but my mother kept telling me that she had made a lot of sacrifices when she was younger just because she wanted to be a good mother to me, and only once in her life had she ever expected me to understand her situation and allow her to prioritize other people rather than just me. She believed that I should have been more understanding instead of shutting her out for so many years, and now apparently I was the one is trying to paint her as the bad guy and not the other way around. It's been messing with my head ever since, and I don't understand if I'm actually the one at fault and ended up expecting way too much from my mother, or if she is just gaslighting me. I'm mostly sure that I'm right, but just to be completely sure, I have decided to post on Reddit to ask you guys for objective opinions. I do find it unfair for refusing to cover the expenses for my half-siblings to go to college, because my estranged mother and step-dad are not doing well financially at the moment. Edit. I have spoken to my uncle, and I have told him that what he did was not right or acceptable, even if his intentions were not bad. The impact of what he did was definitely not good. If he had not told my mother about what I was up to in life and given out my contact info and address without my permission, I wouldn't be in this situation at all. He apologized to me profusely and told me that he had no idea that my mother would end up doing something like this, because even he had no clue that they were struggling financially. Had he known that, he wouldn't have told them anything about my life. Even otherwise, he acknowledged the fact that it was not his place to talk to my mom about these things, and if we had wanted to sort things out on our own, we would have done so without his interference. I do not plan on cutting him out of my life because, after all, it's not like he had his heart in the wrong place. Had that been the case, I would have been a lot more upset with him. But honestly, he just made a mistake. Moreover, he is the reason why I've been able to go to college in the first place, because nobody else had been ready to step up and help me out by taking on the responsibility of becoming a co-signer on my loan application, except for him. If you think about it, had it not been for him, I might not have been in this position at all, and I don't want to be ungrateful to him. But I'm also not a doormat, so I made sure that I told him that what he had done was not right. I think I struck the right balance, and whatever I did was fair enough. Things between us are completely fine. I'm not going to hold this against him because I think in some way, I kind of needed this closure. I have also spoken to my grandparents about what's going on with my mom right now, and they think that I am in the right, and have told me that they're going to try and get her inherited to get off my back. They have always been in touch with my mom because they didn't want to lose contact with their other grandkids, and that's quite understandable. While they can sympathize with what their family is going through, they don't think that what they're putting me through is right or justified. So that's their stance on this, and I think it's fair enough. Update 1. So, it's been almost 9 days since I last spoke to my mom, and since then, she has taken it upon herself to constantly remind me of everything that she had done for me, right from when I was a baby, and email it to me every other day, probably to make me feel like I was indebted to her or something. I don't really understand what the point of any of that was because she was legally supposed to do everything that she did for me. It's not like she did me a favor by raising me on her own, and it's not like she did it for as long as she was supposed to. She did it for as long as it was convenient for her. As soon as I started becoming an inconvenience, she and her husband decided to kick me out under the pretext of saving money and resources for their future and the twins. Well, we are in the future right now, and the twins are grown up, so I think they should rely on themselves and not waste their time trying to guilt trip and manipulate me. I have been ignoring the emails, but a couple of days back, I decided to write back to her, and I told her all of this, whatever I have said in this post so far. Obviously, she did not take it well and started calling me ungrateful once again, and I just told her that she could call me whatever she wanted. It wasn't going to change the facts and the fact that she was a terrible mother, and that was the reason why I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. After that, I blocked the email address that she had been sending me emails from, but she just created another one and started trying to bother me again. So I did the same with that one as well, and I'm going to keep doing it until she realizes that I'm not going to sit here and think about her when she never did the same for me. Honestly speaking, I'm really glad that we are having it out right now, because I'm sure that it will all be over soon, and I'll have the closure that I need. The only reason I had invited them inside my house and spoken to them that day was because I was still under the delusion that maybe they had changed, that maybe they were here to congratulate me and make things right with me. But speaking to them reminded me that they were the kind of people who were even capable. Feeling such things like remorse, guilt, or shame, it helped me open my eyes to just how selfish and manipulative they are once again. Now, I have completely given up any hope of ever reconciling with them. Update: my mother showed up at my work earlier today, and I think that might be the craziest thing that she has ever done so far. Thankfully, I was not at work today, so she left pretty quickly and failed in whatever she had been trying to accomplish. I had taken a day off because I was feeling kind of under the weather, and I'm so glad that I did because I'm sure that otherwise, had I been at work, she definitely would have thrown a tantrum or done something horrible to embarrass me. I found out about it when the receptionist called me to tell me that my mom had shown up at work, demanding that she meet me, and refusing to leave even after she had been told that I hadn't even come into work. I was already pretty scared when I told the receptionist that I would speak to her in person, because I really had no idea what she was going to do. But when they put her on the phone with me, I told her that I was at home, and that if she tried to do anything funny at my workplace, I would sue her so hard that, let alone sending her kids to college, she wouldn't even be able to send them outside of their house out of sheer shame and embarrassment. I think that really scared her because I had tried my best to sound intimidating, and I guess that worked. On the other end, she immediately told me that if I agreed to meet her in person, only then would she get out of my workplace. I told her that she was in no position to be making demands because I knew for a fact that she couldn't afford a lawsuit on her hands right now. If things got extreme, even my company wouldn't hesitate to sue her, and it would be a different conversation altogether because they're not going to be as lenient as me. So, it would be in her best interest to just leave without making much of a fuss. After I said that, she handed the phone back to the receptionist, and I'm assuming that she left because after that, I did not get any calls or notifications regarding this from work. But it was definitely a close call, and I cannot afford something like this happening again. So I have decided to speak to a lawyer just so I can get to know if there are any preventive measures that I can take. I don't know if this is grounds for a restraining order or not because it's not like she has threatened me, but I'm still going to talk to the lawyer and try and figure something out. Until then, I'm just going to have to hope that this recent interaction was bad enough for her to consider leaving me alone. Update 3. Hey, so I guess I don't need to worry about whether I should file a restraining order or not since I'm pretty sure we have grounds for it now. Last week, my mother had shown up at my workplace, and I had somehow managed to get her off my back. After what happened this week, I think everyone should get a restraining order against her. A couple of days ago, when I came back home from work, I saw her standing outside my door. I immediately told her that I was not in the mood to argue with her right now, and if she did not go away, I would call the cops. I even had my phone in my hand, and was about to dial when she literally came running at me and tackled me to the ground, so my phone went flying out of my hands. She started trying to beat me up, and all this while, she was cursing at me continuously, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong in her life. I was taken aback by how psychotic all of this was, so it took me a while to try and fight back. But when I did, it was very easy for me to overpower her because I work out, and I'm also a lot younger than her. Thankfully, my neighbors realized that something was going wrong and called the cops because of all the yelling. They even came to my rescue themselves and held my mother down while we waited for the cops to arrive. When they finally did, I decided to press charges, so she's in a lot of trouble right now. I have also spoken to my lawyer and have filed for a restraining order against her. From what I know, Harry has left with the kids to be with his parents, and I really don't know if he's going to be coming back anytime soon or not, because my grandparents said that after he bailed her out that day, she had been charged with a misdemeanor. Since I was not seriously hurt, he had confronted her about what she had done and said that she couldn't be behaving like this, but she started fighting with him as well. I think she just snapped because obviously she's been going through a hard time, and she just couldn't accept that I was doing well in my life. Honestly, she's responsible for whatever she's going through right now, and I refuse to feel bad for her. Soon enough, I'll have the restraining order against her, and I have also been considering moving out of my house into a bigger one anyway, since I'm now earning more. There is never a better time, and I think I'll finally start looking for options. I really hope that my mother deals with whatever she's going through and tries to be a normal person, because it's embarrassing to be related to somebody like that. Even my grandparents have told me that they don't want to associate with her anymore because she has been pretty rude to them as well, so she only has herself to blame for everyone distancing themselves from her. Anyway, that's none of my concern. Story 2. Caught my dad cheating and told me to keep my mouth shut, or he would cut my inheritance. But I told my stepmom anyway. Now she got half his money in the divorce, and his mistress left him. I have had the absolute misfortune of being born in a literal movie. My family is the most dysfunctional family in the history of families, and even the toxicity shown in movies is no match for what I have been born into. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, but it is what it is, and I can only live through it. I had thought that things would get better, but I think some people enjoy toxicity, and if they don't find it, they cannot thrive. My dad is one of those people. He likes being a victim, and if he is not on the receiving end of poor treatment that allows him to victimize himself, he goes on and creates situations that disrupt peace. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old. Apparently, as my dad says, he and mom were never compatible, and the marriage was the biggest mistake of their lives. They got married young and had me within a year of their wedding, so initially, it was the honeymoon phase, and things were looking fine. It all went south later, when my mom realized that she was just not cut out for parenthood, and that a child was not just a doll you play dress up with, but a big responsibility you have to shoulder for the rest of your life. She freaked out and ran. This is the short version of the story. The long version is that my biological mom was stunning. Every guy would fall madly in love with her and pursue her to the ends of time. Somehow, she got together with dad, and they had me. However, mom realized that she was not satisfied. She did not like being a wife or a mother. She hated the fact that she was committed to somebody in any capacity, and she wanted her freedom back. So she did what any mature person would do. She cheated. Kindly note the sarcasm. And not just once. She cheated multiple times. Every single time she got caught, she apologized but started the same thing again. Dad thinks it was actually on purpose her getting caught. She didn't want to leave herself, so she created a situation that would force dad to leave her. But dad was crazy about her, so he kept tolerating everything. It was toxic, and I don't know how he managed to live with her for so long, but ultimately she had had enough. She abandoned us for one of her partners. No one knows which one, and she ran off. We have had no news of her since. Dad tried his hardest to look for her, to reach out, but she just vanished like a phantom. I was just 3, and that's why I have no memory of her. To me, she is just a figure from my dad's past. She's in no way my mother. She doesn't deserve that title. Once she left, dad drowned himself in work. He started a business that became hugely successful, and he has minted a lot of money since then. I think if my bio mom knew what dad had created in his net worth, she would come running back. But thank God she didn't, because dad met an amazing woman soon after, and she's the person who is my real mother and my real family. I love her more than I love my dad, and she is the best stepmother, or rather, parent that anyone could ever ask for. Dad met my stepmom when I was 6, and they got married when I was 8. She was always nice to me. I remember that I was very apprehensive about her initially, but she took things nice and slow with me, and I warmed up to her very soon to the extent that I used to be attached at her hip. She took me out for movies, to the arcade, and all this before they got married. When I asked her why she put in so much effort into me as an adult, she said that she wanted to create a family with me rather than just be my dad's wife. She knew what she was getting into, and she wanted to do full justice to that role, and it is safe to say that she did. After all these years, I can confidently say that I couldn't have asked for a better mother. Dad and she got married, and 2 years later, she gave birth to twins, my brothers Arthur and Alex. I was a little worried when they were born, because I thought that they were mom's real family and now she wouldn't see me as her own. But I was wrong. Right after they were born and she came back home, she called me and told me that I was her first kid, and nothing on earth could change that. I remember hugging her and weeping like an infant. I love my brothers and was very hands-on with them, and even though raising twins was difficult, Mom made sure to make time for me. We still had our weekly movie nights, even though I said no because I knew how taxing it would get for her. But I think more than me, she was worried that I would feel neglected and she wanted me to realize that she was still my mother and the twins didn't change anything. We have been a happy family for as long as I can remember. Dad got really busy with his business, so it was mostly the four of us, Mom, me, Alex, and Arthur, in our little world together. We thought Dad was busy making money for the family, but we found out recently that Dad was busy doing something entirely different. When I went to college, I got a full scholarship. Dad had a college fund for me, but I didn't need it, and he said that he would give it to me later because I had no use for it at that point. I agreed with him. I could use that money to maybe buy a house or invest. I was sure I didn't need it for college. I graduated from college and got a job in a different state. I stayed in touch with my family, and I am still close to Arthur and Alex, and I know all about their lives. A month ago, on my way to work, I spotted Dad with a woman I didn't know. I knew for sure that she wasn't family. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. Why was he in my city without informing me? There was something shady going on for sure. I called him up, and I saw him receive my call. I tried to talk as normally as possible and asked him what he was up to. He lied to me through his teeth and said that he was busy, and that he would talk to me later. I knew what was up. He was having an affair. I decided to follow him and see what he was up to. I followed him, and I saw that they checked into a hotel. I booked a room there and followed them. I could faintly make out his room number and went and knocked on his door, pretending to be housekeeping. He fell for it and opened the door. When he saw me, it felt as though someone had put a gun to his head. I pushed my way inside and saw a woman that I hadn't seen before. I just sat on the bed shamelessly and asked him to explain. He tried to be dismissive and deflect the blame, saying that I had no business interfering in his personal matters. I told him that if he did not tell me what the hell he was up to, I would call Mom up right now and expose him. I think that scared him, and he admitted that he had been having an affair with this woman for the past 10 years now and that she was the love of his life. I looked at him in disbelief. I couldn't even imagine that he would cheat on someone like Mom. She was the kindest and best woman in the world, and you had to be a different kind of evil to cheat on her. I asked him what was the need to cheat on her, and he said that he did not have the heart to divorce her, and that she would have nowhere to go if he left her. I was stunned and told him that he was a disgraceful man for cheating on Mom, and that I would tell her anyway. He then changed his entire defense and tried to say that after the kids were born, Mom and he degraded into a roommate kind of situation in a few years, and that's why they opened their relationship. I told him that open relationships do not work this way at all. They do not entail having a stable partner of 10 years outside the marriage, so he did not need to be an ass and lie to me. I told him that I was not buying these lies, and that he could do whatever he wanted, but I was going to talk to Mom. He kept on saying that it was an open relationship, and my whole point was that if that were true, I would just call up Mom and confirm. He was adamant that he didn't want me to call her, and that's how his entire bluff of the open marriage fell through. I had a big fight with him, and I called him and his mistress all sorts of names. I told him that he had done the same thing to Mom that his first wife, my biological mother, had done to him. He defended himself, saying that these were two completely different things, and that I would understand when I was older. I told him that I was already 30, and I didn't need to be older to understand what was really happening. He said that the issue with his first wife was completely different, because she was a serial cheater and cheated just for the heck of it. He was apparently actually in love, which is why, according to him, what he was doing was justified and what my bio mom did wasn't. I told him that if these stupid justifications helped him sleep better at night, he was free to buy into them and gaslight himself, but this nonsense would not work on me. I told him that I was going to talk to Mom whether he liked it or not, and there was nothing he could do to stop me. He physically restrained me from leaving the room and told me that if I exposed him to Mom, he would kick me out of the inheritance, and that I would never see a single penny of the wealth he had made. I looked at him in shock, and then I started laughing. I told him that I had never known he could stoop to such levels to save his ass, and that I didn't want his dirty money anyway. I told him to shove his wealth up his ass, and because of this little stunt of his, I was going to involve Arthur and Alex too. Let the world and his kids know what he was really up to. They are 20 years old now, and that is old enough to know these things and have an opinion on them. He begged me to reconsider. When the ultimatum didn't work, he tried bribing me. He said that he would give me full ownership of his business at the expense of Arthur and Alex. I could not believe how he was stooping to levels I previously thought never even existed. I told him that if he thought I would sabotage my brother's future for wealth, he did not know me at all. I also told him that I was glad Mom had raised me and not him because, clearly, with his moral compass, I could literally give competition to the devil. I stormed out of the room, and I couldn't stop crying. Felt as though my world had come crashing down, and that I had to shoulder the burden of God knows what. But I knew I had to act fast. He would try and manipulate Mom and tell her a half-baked story that would make the truth look inconsistent. I booked a ticket to their place immediately, took a week's leave from the office, and left that very night. I knew this was not something that could be done over the phone. I had to be present because I knew Mom would break down, and Arthur and Alex were in college. With this news, Mom couldn't be left alone. I reached the next day, and Mom was overjoyed to see me. She thought I had come to give her a surprise, and I had to stop myself from crying. She had devoted her entire life to this man, and he had betrayed her in the worst possible way. He had been living a double life for 10 years while all this time, she was playing wife and mother to his kids, and making his house a home. It was a pity, and I have never felt such rage as I felt at that moment. If Dad were there, I knew, I would have bashed his skull open. I tried to control my emotions and asked Mom when Dad would be back. She told me that he had actually gone for a week-long trip, but had called her at night saying that he was coming back urgently. She was even happier because she thought that now I would get to meet Dad as well. I had absolutely no idea how I was going to break this news to her, but I also knew that as her daughter and as a woman, it was my responsibility to tell her, no matter the consequences. I knew that Dad would kick me out of the inheritance, and I knew that Mom would be devastated and heartbroken. But I couldn't just stay quiet. I had to do this for her, and I decided to do it when Dad was home. He came home that night, and he was stunned to see me. He knew that the inevitable was coming, and he just looked so utterly defeated that for a fraction of a second, I felt sorry for him. But it was only for a fraction of a second. I sat them down and told Mom that I had something to tell her, and I let everything out. I told her what I saw. I told her I called him, and that he lied to me, and then I followed him. I also told her how he pretended that they were in an open relationship, and all that nonsense that he had spouted that day. I didn't miss out on a single detail. Obviously, she was shocked and in complete denial. Initially, when Dad saw her reluctance to accept the obvious, he pounced at the chance and started to give some lame-ass excuse, but she cut him off in the middle of his speech, and then they fought. They fought like two lions at each other's throats. My mother has always been a gentle person. I have rarely seen her yell, be angry, or react violently. She has always been the kind to have control over her emotions, but not that day. That day, she was livid. They fought for what I think was an hour or more. It was just plain yelling and mudslinging from both ends, and I didn't say anything but just sat there and listened to them curse each other out. I don't know what outcome they wanted from the fight because there's no coming back from this. Mom is not someone who will ever condone or tolerate cheating. She said that they were over, and that she was going to go ahead with the divorce, but she wanted to do it gracefully for the sake of the kids. But my dad, I don't know what kind of man he has become, said that he would not let her leave him, and that he was calling Arthur and Alex home so they could talk some sense into her. He got their tickets done that night itself, and they arrived 2 days later. Those 2 days were complete hell in the house. I stayed with Mom the entire time, and Dad moved to the spare room. They weren't talking to each other, and I wasn't talking to Dad either. Dad went to pick the boys up from the airport, and I don't know what he said to them, but when they came back, they were completely brainwashed. Mom tried to be dignified about the entire situation, and both she and I had thought the boys would take her side and kick Dad to the curb, but the exact opposite happened. They took Dad's side and told Mom to suck it up and not break the family. I wanted to slap them right then. It was Alex speaking, but it looked like Arthur was in full agreement. Dad looked smug about the entire situation, and I knew that he had tempted them with money. I got up and asked them if Dad had put their college funds over their heads, and they didn't say anything. I kept asking them if that was the truth, but they just refused to budge. I told them that I would help them get loans and help them repay them as well, and they did not have to be scared and support Dad, because they felt they had no other option. But they didn't say anything. They just kept parroting what Dad said the other night. I didn't even have the guts to look at Mom. I knew how heartbroken she must have been, and I know she had raised them better than that. Dad couldn't exploit me because he knew that I wasn't financially dependent on him, but this was where he had an edge over Arthur and Alex. He could just choose to cut them off anytime. He is such a lowly scumbag, and I am disgusted that I am biologically related to him. Mom asked the twins if they genuinely thought she should continue in the marriage with a cheater, and they said yes. She said that she was sorry they felt that way, but she wouldn't oblige their wishes. She said that she was going to file for divorce, whether anyone liked it or not, and whether she had any support or not. I immediately went to her and told her that she had my full support, and that she had no reason to worry about anything. Dad sent the boys to their room and asked Mom to reconsider in a condescending tone. He was not even ashamed of his behavior and told her that the entire blame for breaking the family would fall on her shoulders if she proceeded with this. She said that was a cross she was willing to bear, but she couldn't stand being married to a cheater. That was the end of the discussion between them, and Dad left in a huff. I have come back to work now, and I am in regular touch with Mom. I don't know what's going to happen, and I feel so sad that I am not there to support her during this time, but I have my obligations too. I just hope the boys see sense and choose the right thing instead of being scared about the future if Dad takes away their funds. I know they are in a difficult position, but I just wish they had the guts to stand up to this blatant tyranny and be there for their mom, who needs their support now more than ever. Update: Mom has filed for divorce. She tried to do it the nice way, but then she found out that Dad had genuinely kicked me out of the inheritance, and I would get nothing if she proceeded with a divorce. He told her that I was the one who was supporting her, and he tried to blackmail her, saying that if she actually filed, he would kick me out and ensure that I never saw a single penny of the college fund or the family wealth ever again. I think that was his last bargaining chip with her, and he was trying everything in the book to make sure that Mom didn't leave him. He knew that Mom loved me, and that she would not agree to anything that would sabotage my life or my future, and he was using this to his advantage. Too bad for him that now, I'm a grown woman and I don't need his scraps. He cannot keep his filthy money over me and manipulate me, and I would not let him do this to Mom either. Mom called me in tears, saying that she was thinking she wouldn't leave him because he had told her that he would not give me anything. It broke my heart to see that even in a situation like this, where she was so miserable, she was thinking about me. I told her not to worry about me and to go ahead with the divorce. I told her that I was doing really well for myself and that I didn't need his dirty money anyway. She broke down and thanked me for standing by her, and I reassured her that I will always stand by her. Now comes the interesting part. Mom got in touch with her lawyer, and the lawyer is very smart and shrewd, and he has taken Dad to task. Mom had not given me the details of the divorce, but Dad called me up yesterday and started yelling at me, saying that I was the one who was supporting Mom and ruining him, and that I was no daughter of his if I let this continue. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I called up Mom, and surprisingly she seemed in a very good mood. She had moved out earlier and was living with a friend, and that is when she gave me the spicy details. I couldn't stop laughing when I heard the story. Karma had come to bite my father in the ass, and now he was too deep in his own mess to do anything about it. I think that is what arrogance does to a person. It makes him feel that he is invincible and clouds his memory, keeping him away from reality. Too bad he came crashing down to the ground. Years and years ago, when Mom and Dad were married, Mom had sold her jewelry and family heirlooms to fund Dad's business. None of us knew this. Mom said that she never felt the need to tell us or involve us in these financial matters, and that she had given that money to Dad because she trusted him and wanted him to create a name for himself. Never in a million years had she anticipated that he would be the one to turn around and stab her in the back. When Mom disclosed this to her lawyer, he took Dad to task. Mom has asked for a 50% stake in Dad's business because of the investment she made into it all those years ago. The issue is that the business cannot run in a partnership. I can't disclose much about his work because I don't want this going public, and now Mom's lawyer says that Dad will either have to buy out her half or just run the business in partnership, which is not practically possible. So essentially, Dad is completely screwed, and now I think this is why he seemed so scared when I caught him and told him that I would be telling Mom. I think he knew that if this went public, Mom would leave him, and since she had invested so much, he would have to give her half the business. Now he wants to make amends, but Mom is not in the mood, and rightly so. There is no other compromise that she is open to, and it seems that the judge is leaning heavily in her favor. Dad's little affair with the love of his life has ended up being very costly for him. It has cost him his family and now his entire career, and I couldn't be happier. Men like him who exploit their wives and take them for granted deserve this and much worse. Update 2. The divorce has been finalized. Mom is a single woman, and she has possession of half of Dad's assets. Dad is mad about it, and he hasn't stopped ranting about it to anyone who has ears. Everyone is sick of his nonsense though, and he is losing people who would even be willing to speak to him by the minute. The best part of it all is that the love of his life, his mistress of the last 10+ years, has left him. The minute she found out that he had no money left was the minute she left him. So Dad essentially lost his family, his money, and his respect for a woman who left him the minute his net worth faded, and the entire charm of being involved with a rich and married man wore off. He's the biggest loser at the end of it all, and I am so happy about it. Once the divorce was finalized, I sent him a text that he was dead to me from that day on, and that he had no reason to contact me ever again. I've blocked him since then, and I honestly don't want anything to do with him anymore. He can rot in hell with his filthy morals for all I care. And now for the most interesting part of it all. Mom has willed the entire share of her property and assets to me because she knew that Dad wasn't going to give me anything, and had basically bought Arthur and Alex by keeping their funds and his money over their heads. She didn't want me to lose out, which is why she has publicly declared that she is going to give everything to me. When Arthur and Alex got to know about this, they called me up and demanded that I split my share with them, because we are family and family is supposed to look out for each other. I told them that Mom was their family too, but they did not have these strong opinions when she was sobbing and asking them for support. They had nothing to say to that but were insistent that I split my share with them. I told them that they were behaving like entitled brats, and while I know Dad had them under his thumb, they still had to at least be decent human beings. That is when Arthur said something I will never forget. He said that since I was not Mom's real daughter, I had no right to that money anyway, and that only they were Mom's real family. I asked Alex if he felt the same way as his brother, and he said yes. It hurt like hell. I didn't expect such a low blow from them. I know they said it out of anger and that they didn't mean it, but I don't care. It was hurtful and mean, and I don't think I can forgive them for that. I told them that if they were Mom's real family, why was I the only one standing with her when she needed support? Why didn't they speak up then? I said that if I was not their real family, they had no business talking to me and begging me for scraps. I cut the call and blocked them. I know they are kids, but at 20 years old, you need to have some kind of sensitivity to such issues. I know that I'm going to forgive them ultimately, but as of now, I just can't talk to them. They have hurt me a lot, and maybe I will get over it in time and we will normalize things, but now I just want space, and I need the mental peace and stability to be able to look after my mother and be there for her. She has been very strong throughout this ordeal, and it is my turn to support her and give her love and care just like she has been doing for me ever since I was a kid. Story 3. Caught my wife cheating with our landlord when I took a sick day off, but she begged for forgiveness, so I pretended to consider it, then deleted her novel she spent 3 years writing. I browse this subreddit practically every day, and I used to be that guy in the comments defending women whenever someone would post about getting cheated on. You know the type. Not all women are like that. You just need to find the right one, all that BS. I really believed it too. Why wouldn't I? I've been married to my wife for 6 years, and she's been nothing but honest with me the whole time. At least, that's what I thought. I never caught her in a lie, and never had any reason to think she was being shady. She was even the one who'd tell me about her guy friends hitting on her or her coworkers being inappropriate. She'd show me the messages and everything, saying how gross it was. Hell, she even cut off contact with her male best friend when I mentioned being uncomfortable about how close they were getting. That's the kind of woman I thought I had, honest, loyal, putting our relationship first. God, typing this out now makes me feel like such an idiot. Everyone who's been cheated on probably has a similar story about how perfect everything seemed. Well, here's the truth I've learned the hard way. You can't trust anyone, not your family, not your friends, and definitely not the person sleeping next to you every night. I'm 33, my wife Jenna is 31, and up until recently, I really thought we had one of the good marriages. You know how it goes. Everyone has their fights and rough patches, but compared to my friends' marriages, we were solid. Never went to bed angry, always made time for date nights even when money was tight, supported each other's dreams and ambitions. Jenna was even helping me study for some certifications to boost my career. Meanwhile, I was her biggest cheerleader with her writing. That's what makes all of this so much worse. The living situation is pretty standard for people our age in this economy. We rent because mortgages are insane right now. Our place is in this big house that's been converted into 4 separate apartments. The landlord lives in one of them. He's this older guy, probably in his 50s. The other 2 units have regular tenants, young families like us just trying to get by. The landlord seemed decent enough when we moved in 4 years ago. He'd fix things when they broke, kept the building maintained, that sort of thing. Sometimes we'd butt heads over stupid stuff like parking spots or noise complaints, but nothing major. We kept things professional, maybe send him some food during the holidays, or if Jenna was baking, but that was it. I actually liked that about the setup. Everyone had their own space, no forced friendliness, just normal neighbor stuff. Turns out I should have been paying more attention to what was happening when I wasn't around. Something you need to understand about our schedules. Jenna works as a copywriter, so she's home pretty much 24/7. Her company only needs her in the office once or twice a month for team meetings or client presentations. Meanwhile, I'm busting my ass working 6 days a week at my job, not because I want to, trust me. I'd rather be home with my wife, but because that's what the job demands. I'm in construction management, and when you're overseeing multiple projects, you can't just clock out at 5 and forget about everything. I'd leave at 7:00 a.m. and usually wouldn't get back until 7:00 or 8:00 p.m. Even on Sundays, I'd sometimes get called in if there was an emergency at one of the sites. Jenna always said she understood that. She was proud of how hard I worked for us. She'd make me dinner when I got home late, run me baths when my back was killing me from being on my feet all day. I actually felt guilty sometimes about leaving her alone so much. I remember the exact day everything fell apart. I woke up feeling like absolute garbage, stuffy nose, headache. I usually push through being sick. Bills don't pay themselves, and I've worked through worse. That morning something just felt off. Maybe it was my gut trying to tell me something, I don't know. I texted my boss that I needed to take a personal day off. He was cool about it. I'd actually built up like 3 weeks of unused sick days because I never take time off. I thought I'd surprise Jenna by acting to go to work and then surprise her when I came back. Maybe we could order lunch and watch some Netflix together. We hadn't had a whole day to ourselves in months. I even went to that fancy coffee place she likes on the way home. Got her favorite iced caramel whatever with extra whipped cream. I was actually excited, like a kid surprising their parents or something. I kept thinking about how happy she'd be to have me home, how maybe we could finally have that lazy day together she's always asking for. Sitting in that drive-through, smiling like an idiot while ordering her coffee, I wish I could go back and tell myself to just go to work. Sometimes, ignorance really is bliss. I pulled into our usual parking spot, balancing that stupid coffee I bought her in one hand. Everything looked normal at first. Her car was there. The neighbor's kids were playing in the yard, just a regular Tuesday morning. But when I got to our door, something wasn't right. The door was cracked open just slightly. Now Jenna is crazy about home security. She triple checks the locks every night and has cameras set up at all our windows. She even made me install a video doorbell last year because she was worried about package thieves. So seeing the door open, like that red flag number one, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was bringing in groceries or getting the mail. Maybe she stepped out for a second to talk to the neighbors. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. We're in a safe neighborhood. She's a grown woman who can handle herself. Still, something in my gut told me this wasn't normal. The door is never open when she's home alone. What I saw when I walked in. Man, I don't even know how to write this without getting angry all over again. Right there in our living room, on the couch where we watch movies together every weekend, where we had Christmas dinner with her parents last year, my wife was bent over, wearing nothing but one of my t-shirts, and behind her, our 50-some-year-old landlord, the same guy who just fixed our bathroom sink last week. His pants were around his ankles, and he was. I just stood there. The coffee slipped out of my hand and spilled all over our entryway rug. The sound of the cup hitting the floor is what made them notice me. I managed to say, "What the hell is going on here?" Like an idiot, as if I needed clarification. Like there was any possible explanation that could make this okay. That my wife being bent over our couch by a man old enough to be her father could be anything other than what it obviously was. I knew exactly what was going on, but my brain just couldn't process it. 6 years of marriage, all those nights I worked late to give us a better life, all those times she told me she loved me and only me. It all meant nothing, and I had to stand there and watch it all crumble in real time. The moment they heard my voice, everything erupted into chaos. Jenna let out this high-pitched squeal like she was the victim here, scrambling to cover herself with my t-shirt. The landlord, the supposedly respectable older man who'd sat at our dinner table and discussed property improvements with me, was desperately trying to pull his pants up while shuffling towards the door. His face was bright red, but not from shame, probably just worried about his reputation in the building if this got out. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to knock him out right there. I'm not a violent person, but in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to throw the hardest punch of my life. I wanted to make him hurt like he'd hurt me. I've been going to the gym 5 days a week for the past 3 years. I could have done some serious damage. Something in the back of my mind kept replaying all those news stories about one-punch deaths, especially with older people headlines about guys serving manslaughter charges because of one moment of rage. I'm not trying to catch a case over these two pieces of trash, no matter how much they deserve it. The landlord practically ran past me, bumping into the wall in his hurry to get out, a coward who couldn't even look me in the eye. I let him go. What's that saying about revenge being a dish best served cold? I made a mental note to deal with him later. There would be time for that, maybe a call to his wife, or perhaps a nice chat with the other tenants about what kind of man their landlord really is. That left me alone with Jenna, if I can even call her by her name anymore. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person I married 6 years ago. That Jenna would never do this to me. That Jenna loved me, respected me, valued our marriage. This stranger in front of me was just a cheater who got caught. I've never wanted to hit a woman in my life. My dad raised me better than that. He always said a man who hits a woman is no man at all. Standing there watching her try to act like the scared, innocent wife, I had to keep reminding myself of my father's words. I had to keep my hands balled into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms, until I felt blood. Because if I let go, if I let that rage take over for even a second, I knew I would do something I could never take back. I've been in fights before. I've been angry before. This was different. This was pure, uncontrollable fury mixed with the kind of pain that makes you want to burn everything to the ground. Type of rage that makes good men do terrible things, and that's exactly why I couldn't let it control me. There she was, clutching my t-shirt to her body like she suddenly cared about modesty. The same woman who had just been bent over our couch with another man was now trying to act shy and vulnerable. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil even more. She was playing the victim, trying to make me feel like the bad guy for walking into my own home and catching her cheating. That's what pissed me off the most, not just the cheating, but this pathetic act she was putting on now. So this is what happens when I'm not at home, huh? I barely recognized my own voice. It came out low and cold, nothing like how I usually talk to her. She started this stuttering explanation, tripping over her words like a kid caught stealing cookies. It's not. It was just what? Just a mistake. Just a one-time thing. Just destroying our entire marriage for a quickie with a man old enough to be her father. She couldn't even get a full sentence out. Just stood there trembling like a leaf. I won't lie, seeing her scared and struggling to explain herself gave me this twisted sense of satisfaction. After what she just did to me, watching her squirm felt like the tiniest bit of justice. I've never been aggressive with Jenna before, never even raised my voice at her in 6 years of marriage. I walked up to her. She actually took a step back, like she was afraid of me, the same guy who held her hair back when she was sick, who drove 3 hours to get her favorite cake for her birthday, who worked overtime for months to buy her that laptop she wanted for her writing. I grabbed the collar of my own t-shirt that she was wearing and pulled her closer. She was looking everywhere but at me, at the floor, at the walls, at the door where her lover had just run out like a coward. That made it even worse. She couldn't even give me the basic respect of looking me in the eye after what she'd done, after destroying everything we built together. She couldn't even face me. I yanked the collar harder, trying to force her to look up, to look at me. Each time I tried to catch her eye, she turned away like I was the one who had done something wrong. I pushed her away from me, maybe harder than I meant to, but at that point I just needed her away from me. She fell to the ground, still clutching that stupid t-shirt. She sat there on our living room floor. Now it was just another place she had tainted with her betrayal. I stood there watching her cry, and for the first time since we met, I felt absolutely nothing for her. No love, no sympathy, not even pity, just disgust and rage. I turned and walked straight for the door. As I was leaving, I heard her cry out, "Babe," in this weak, pathetic voice, the same voice she used to use when she wanted me to stay home from work or when she was trying to convince me to take her on vacation. That voice used to melt my heart. Now it just made me want to vomit. The fact that she had the nerve to call me that after what I just saw. I slammed the door so hard, the window rattled. I needed to put as much distance between us as possible before I lost what little control I had left. I got in my car and just started driving. No destination, no plan, just driving to keep moving. I must have circled our neighborhood 50 times. Every time I passed our apartment building, I had to grip the steering wheel tighter to stop myself from turning in. The sick part is I knew exactly where to find both of them. The landlord was probably hiding in his unit downstairs, with my wife where I left her. But I'm not that guy, so I kept driving, trying to drown out the thoughts in my head with random radio stations. None of it helped. I ended up parking at Walmart around 2:00 p.m. and just sat there in my car, staring at nothing, watching people go about their normal lives like the world hadn't just ended. Families shopping together, couples holding hands, elderly people helping each other with groceries, all these normal people living their normal lives while my entire world was burning down. I sat there for hours, my phone blowing up with messages from Jenna that I couldn't bring myself to read. The sun went down, the parking lot emptied out, and still I sat there. I couldn't go home. It wasn't home anymore, just a crime scene where my marriage had been murdered. I watched the security guard do his rounds, probably wondering why some guy was sitting in his car for hours in a Walmart parking lot. I must have looked suspicious as hell, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I finally drove home around 10:00 p.m., half hoping she wouldn't be there. But no, there she was, sitting on our couch, the same damn couch where I caught her with him just hours ago. She had changed into her favorite pajamas, the ones I bought her last Christmas, and her face was all puffy and red, like she'd been crying for hours. Her makeup was smeared everywhere, tissues scattered all around her. The whole scene looked like something out of those dramatic movies she loves so much. Just another performance by Jenna, the woman who apparently deserved an Oscar for fooling me for 6 years. Her crying didn't affect me one bit. Why should it? She wasn't crying because she felt bad about betraying me. She wasn't crying because she regretted throwing away 6 years of marriage. No, she was crying because she got caught, because her comfortable life of playing happy wife while screwing the landlord when I was at work was finally over. Those weren't tears of regret, they were tears of inconvenience. "Please, baby, I want to talk to you. Please sit down," she practically whispered, her voice all raspy from crying. The baby part really got to me. "Did you him again after I left?" I asked her point blank. Her face crumpled, and she started sobbing even harder. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The whole thing was just so absurd. Here she was, trying to act all sorry and devastated when, for all I knew, she'd spent the afternoon consoling herself in the landlord's bed. "Please just sit down with me. I'm begging you," she kept pleading, like she deserved even one more minute of my time. But you know what's really messed up? I sat down, not on the couch, I'll never sit on that thing again, but in the armchair across from her. Maybe I wanted to hear what kind of excuses she could possibly come up with. She just sat there staring at me. Finally, she started with the typical cheater script. "I'm so sorry. Sorry she got caught. It was a stupid mistake that she'd probably been making for months. I was just feeling lonely while I was working to support us." Then came the kicker. She actually tried to blame it on being horny, and him making suggestive comments, like she had no control over her actions, like she just accidentally fell onto his dick. "Next thing I knew," she said, trailing off into more tears, "next thing I knew." What? She just happened to take her clothes off? Just happened to bend over our couch? Just happened to let a man old enough to be her father have his way with her in our living room? The Jenna I married would never do this. The Jenna I loved would never betray me like this. This woman, this was just someone wearing my wife's face, living in my house, spending my money, and apparently screwing our landlord for who knows how long. And now she was putting on the performance of her life, trying to cry her way out of consequences through her tears. Jenna swore up and down that this was the first and only time anything had happened between them. She even put her hand on her heart, a gesture she used to do when making serious promises to me, and said she'd never do it again. The crazy part? She actually sounded convincing. 6 years of marriage, and I'd never caught her in a lie before today, so maybe she was telling the truth about it being a one-time thing. But you know what? It doesn't matter, not even a little bit. Here's the thing about cheating that all cheaters conveniently forget. It's not just one bad decision. It's hundreds of tiny decisions, one after another. Each one a conscious choice to betray your partner. She chose to flirt back when he made those suggestive comments. She chose to let him into our apartment while I was at work. Every single step of the way, she could have stopped it, could have said no, could have thought about her husband of 6 years who was working his ass off to give her a good life. But she didn't. She chose her own pleasure over our marriage. The more I sat there, listening to her sob and beg, the more I realized something. Even if I wanted to forgive her, even if I was stupid enough to try, I'd never be able to look at her the same way again. The trust was gone, shattered like a mirror, and no amount of superglue could put it back together without showing the cracks. And then there was the landlord situation. He lived right downstairs. I'd have to see his face every day, knowing what he did with my wife. I'd have to resist the urge to cave his skull in every time I passed him in the hallway. I cut her off mid-apology. "Stop," I said. "Just stop. We're done." She tried to argue, tried to tell me we could fix this, that we could go to counseling, that she'd do anything to make it right. But there was nothing to fix. You can't unfuck someone. It was over the moment she let him touch her. I wanted to throw her out right then and there. Let her go live with her new man, see how she likes being with someone older than her dad. But I knew I couldn't stay in this building, not with him here. After that conversation, I just couldn't stand to be in the same room with her anymore. I went to our bedroom, grabbed my suitcase from the closet, and started throwing clothes in it. I didn't even bother folding them, just grabbed whatever I could see, stuffing 6 years of life into 2 bags like some kind of refugee fleeing a war zone, which, in a way, I guess I was. Jenna followed me around the room the whole time, crying and begging me to stay. She offered to leave instead, said she'd go stay with her sister, said she'd do anything to fix this. The irony of her offers just made me laugh. "I wouldn't dream of separating you from your man," I told her. "You two seem so happy together. Maybe he'll let you move in with him. You already know where he lives." The look on her face when I said that was like I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the pain I was feeling. She collapsed onto our bed and started sobbing again. I just walked out, didn't even look back. I've been in this cheap hotel for 2 days now, the kind of place that rents by the week, where the sheets smell like industrial bleach and you can hear every conversation through the paper-thin walls. I called in sick to work the first time I've ever done that without actually being sick. My boss probably thinks I have COVID or something. I don't care, I can barely function right now. I'm writing this from the hotel room at 3:00 a.m. because I need to tell someone what happened. I keep thinking about revenge. I know it's petty, I know it won't fix anything, but I need something, some way to make her feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling right now. Time might heal all wounds, but right now revenge is the only painkiller I can think of. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post, and I've done something that I need to get off my chest. I wish I could be one of those cold-hearted people who can hurt others without feeling guilty, but I've got this annoying thing called a conscience that keeps nagging at me. Still, what I did to her, I think it's pretty fair payback for what she did to me. Let me tell you about Jenna's dream, not the fake dream of our happy marriage. Her real dream, the one she's had since before I met her. Jenna wants to be a writer, not just the copywriting she does for work, churning out product descriptions and marketing emails. No, she wants to be a real author, like her idol Colleen Hoover, writing romance novels, drama, all that emotional stuff that sells millions of copies. It's all she's ever talked about at parties. She'd tell anyone who would listen about her book ideas. She had this whole plan: finish her novel, get an agent, become a bestseller, quit her day job. I used to love watching her eyes light up when she talked about it. 3 years ago, she finally started writing her book. I remember the day perfectly. She came home from her shopping trip with this expensive notebook she'd bought specially for outlining her story. She was so excited, like a kid on Christmas morning, and stupid me, I supported her completely. I bought her a new laptop just for writing, set up a whole office space in our spare room, and brought her coffee and snacks while she worked. I read every chapter as she finished them, giving her feedback and encouragement. "You're going to be the next big thing," I'd tell her. "This is amazing, babe, keep going." And you know what? The book was actually good, really good. It was this complex story about family secrets and forbidden love, oh the irony, that kept you guessing until the end. She wrote every day for 3 years, pouring her heart and soul into it. The manuscript was over 990,000 words, that's like 360 pages. She just needed to write the climax and ending, maybe another 2 or 3 chapters. She was so close to finishing. Her dream project would probably have been done in another month or two. I remember sitting in bed with her just 2 weeks ago, listening to her talk about how she was going to handle the big reveal at the end. She had it all planned out, every twist, every emotional moment. She was so proud of what she created, and I was proud of her too. I actually couldn't wait to read the finished product. After a few days in that depressing hotel room, I texted Jenna that I wanted to come home and talk things over. The second she got my message, she started bombarding my phone with replies. "Yes, baby, please come home. I miss you so much. We can fix this." All that stuff. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I had to play it cool, had to make her think she had a chance at fixing things. When I walked through the door, her face lit up. She'd cleaned the whole apartment, probably the first thing she'd done since the landlord wasn't busy bending her over our furniture. She'd even made my favorite dinner, lasagna, from scratch, the same recipe her mom taught her when we first got married. The manipulation was almost impressive. For the next few hours, I sat there and listened to her sob story, how sorry she was, how she'd never speak to the landlord again, how she loved me more than anything and couldn't live without me, how she'd do anything to fix what she'd broken. I just nodded along, saying things like, "I need time, and I'll think about it," classic lines that give hope without promising anything. I learned from the best. Right when bedtime came around, she tried to get me to come to our bedroom, starting with the puppy dog eyes, then moving on to touching my arm, my chest, the same move she probably used on the landlord. I shut that down real quick, told her I needed space, that I'd sleep on the couch. She looked disappointed, but tried to hide it. "Whatever you need, baby," she said, like she was some kind of understanding wife. She left her laptop on the coffee table, exactly where I knew she would. Jenna always works on her novel late at night, and she always leaves her computer there so she can grab it first thing in the morning. Some habits never change, even after you destroy your marriage. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, then waited another hour, just to be sure she was asleep. The laptop password was the same as always, our anniversary date. I found her manuscript folder easily enough. She had it saved in 3 places. The desktop, an external hard drive, and her cloud storage. Always back up your work, right? That's what I told her when I set up her cloud storage account. Another way I tried to support her dreams. I sat there for a full minute, cursor hovering over the delete button. 3 years of work, 990,000 words, hundreds of hours of writing, planning, dreaming, everything she'd worked for since we got married. My finger was shaking on the mouse pad. A small voice in my head was screaming at me to stop, telling me this was too far, that I'd regret it. Then I remembered what I saw on that couch. The hesitation vanished. I deleted everything, the desktop copy, the backup, the cloud version. Then I emptied the trash. Then I used a file shredder program to make sure nothing could be recovered. 3 years of work, gone in less than 5 minutes. Just to be thorough, I went into her email and deleted every copy she'd ever sent to herself or her beta readers. Found a few chapters she'd shared with her writing group and deleted those, too. By the time I was done, there wasn't a single word of her manuscript left anywhere. Her dream, her future bestseller, all of it was as dead as our marriage. I've done some things I'm not proud of in my life, but watching someone's dreams disappear right in front of them, that hits different. Don't get me wrong. Every time I start feeling guilty, I just remember, and suddenly I feel a lot better about what I did. Still, having a conscience is a real pain in the ass sometimes. The day after I deleted everything, Jenna was acting like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, worked on her copywriting assignments. She didn't touch her laptop for creative writing that day, which was unusual for her. She always wrote at least a few hundred words of her novel, even on busy days, but I figured she was too focused on trying to fix our marriage to work on her book. The second day was the same. All normal on the surface, like we were just a regular couple going through a rough patch. She did her regular work, answered client emails, edited some marketing copy, still didn't open her manuscript folder. I kept waiting for her to notice, kept watching her face for any sign that she discovered what I'd done. Nothing, just more attempts at acting like the perfect wife. Then came day 3. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. This little gasp from the living room, like someone had punched her in the stomach. "No, no, no, no," she kept saying, getting louder each time. I walked in to find her staring at her laptop screen, face white as a sheet. She was clicking frantically through folders, checking her cloud storage, her email, everywhere she might have saved it. "Babe," she said, voice shaking, "do you have any copies of my book? You know, from when you were reviewing chapters for me." For a second, I actually felt bad. I did have copies of most chapters stored in my email. Then I remembered how many nights I'd stayed late at work to pay for that laptop she wrote on, and the guilt disappeared. "No, sorry," I said, trying to sound concerned. "Let me check my computer though." I made a show of looking through my files, even though I'd already deleted everything the night before. "Nothing here," I told her. "Did you check your backups?" She was starting to pull at her hair, something she only does when she's really stressed. The last time I saw her do that was when her dad was in the hospital. "It's gone," she whispered. "Everything's gone. 3 years of work, just gone." Then she turned to me. Did you delete it? The accusation in her voice almost made me laugh, like she had any right to be angry with me after what she did. I put on my best offended face. Are you serious? You think I'd do something that pathetic? That's more your style. You're the one who knows how to hurt people you claim to love. That last part felt good to say. She started crying then. Not the fake tears from when I caught her cheating, but real ugly sobs, the kind that shake your whole body, just like the tears I'd been fighting back since I found her with the landlord. Karma, isn't it? I stood there watching her fall apart. She lost 3 years of work. I lost 6 years of trust. Fair trade if you ask me. While Jenna was still having her breakdown over the manuscript, I decided it was time for the final act. I put on my best sudden realization face and told her I'd been kidding myself thinking we could work things out. This is too much, I said, watching her face crumble even more. You destroyed everything we had. I can't just pretend that didn't happen. Perfect timing, really. Her precious book was gone, and now her last hope of saving our marriage was disappearing too. The wail she let out probably could have been heard through the whole building. Maybe even the landlord heard it from his apartment downstairs. Good. She collapsed onto the floor, this broken heap of a person who'd lost everything in the span of a few minutes. The sounds coming out of her weren't even crying anymore, more like the noise an animal makes when it's mortally wounded. I stood there packing my bags while she sobbed, throwing whatever I could grab into duffel bags and boxes. Clothes, electronics, important documents. The wedding album stayed right where it was. She could burn it for all I cared. Just before I walked out, I couldn't resist twisting the knife one last time. Sorry about your book, I said, trying to sound sincere, but hey, it's all still in your head, right? You can always start over. The look she gave me, I think she knew right then that I deleted it. But what could she do? Accuse me of deleting her manuscript after she'd our landlord in our living room. I walked out of there feeling like I'd finally balanced the scales. Now I'm staying at this dingy extended stay motel while I look for a new place. It's not great. Weird stains on the carpet, neighbors who fight at 3:00 a.m. That kind of thing. But it's better than staying in that apartment. The lease is up in 4 months anyway. Let Jenna figure out how to pay for it. Maybe she can work out some special arrangement with the landlord. They seem pretty cozy already. I know she can't afford the place on her own with her copywriting job. Even with both our incomes, we were barely making rent each month. But that's not my problem anymore. Maybe she can move in with her new man. I'm sure his wife would love that. Or maybe she can start an OnlyFans. She's clearly got no problem with people seeing her naked anyway. I had my lawyer serve her with divorce papers yesterday. She can keep the apartment and all the furniture. It's all contaminated anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm making sure I get compensated properly in other ways. Sure, I don't have concrete proof of her cheating, kind of hard to take pictures when you're in shock from finding your wife bent over your couch. But this isn't about proving infidelity. This is about making sure I come out of this with enough money to start over somewhere else. The lawyer says we can probably get a decent settlement even without proof of the affair. Jenna is so desperate to keep this quiet, to maintain her good girl image, that she'll probably agree to whatever terms we put in front of her. Plus, I've got texts from her begging me to come back, admitting she made a mistake. Not exactly a smoking gun, but enough to show she did something wrong. Between that and the threat of me telling everyone we know exactly what happened, I think she'll be pretty much motivated to settle quickly and generously. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just destroying someone's dreams. It's walking away and letting them live with what they've done. Update. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I figured I should let you all know how things turned out with Jenna, my now officially ex-wife, the one who thought screwing our landlord while I was at work was a good idea. Yeah, the divorce is finally done, signed, sealed, and delivered. Never thought I'd be divorced at 33, but here we are. Also, people were mentioning why I didn't talk more about the landlord in my previous posts. The answer is simple. Why should I? He wasn't the one who broke my trust, and the person who I was married to. He can jump off a cliff for all I care. Now, on to what happened in the update. The settlement actually worked out pretty well for me. No alimony payments, thank God. The last thing I needed was to keep supporting her while she figures out her life. I got to keep our car, which was probably worth more than the furniture she kept. My lawyer really came through. Turns out the threat of your reputation being ruined is a pretty good motivator during divorce negotiations. The funny part came after the final hearing. We were standing outside the courthouse, and I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, so, how's the book coming along? The look on her face, if looks could kill, I'd be 6 FT under. She just exploded right there on the courthouse steps. You deleted it. I know you deleted it, you bastard. She was practically screaming at this point, mascara running down her face, just like the day I caught her cheating. She told me she'd tried starting over, tried rewriting it from memory, but it wasn't working. It's not the same, she kept saying. 3 years of work gone. I'll never get it back. Then she called me evil, said I was a monster for destroying her dream. That's when I laughed. Couldn't help it, really. Guess that makes 2 of us, I told her. You destroyed our marriage. I destroyed your book. Karma's funny like that. She tried to argue that what I did was worse somehow, but I shut that down quick. Anything bad that happens to you from here on out is just the universe balancing the scales. Nothing to do with me. This part? Found out through mutual friends that she couldn't afford to keep the apartment after all. Guess copywriting doesn't pay as well when you have to cover all the bills yourself. No idea where she's living now. Don't really care either. Maybe she moved in with the landlord. Maybe she's back at her parents' house writing her sad little stories. Not my problem anymore. It's crazy how different things turned out from what I'd planned 6 months ago. I thought Jenna and I would grow old together. Thought we'd celebrate when her book got published, maybe start a family once we were more financially stable. I did everything right, supported her dreams, worked my ass off to provide for us, stayed faithful. But you can't control what other people do. You can't make someone stay loyal just because you are. But you know what? I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. My new place is smaller, but it's mine. Started going to the gym more, reconnected with some old friends, even went on a few dates. Nothing serious yet. Trust issues are to get over, but I'm getting there. They say living well is the best revenge, but I think destroying someone's dreams, and then living well is even better. Some people might think what I did was too harsh, but those people have probably never walked in on their spouse cheating with someone they knew. They've never had their entire world destroyed in an afternoon. Sometimes, you have to fight fire with fire. She took something irreplaceable from me, so I took something irreplaceable from her. Fair is fair. I know I'm going to be fine. I've got a good job, and most importantly, I've got my self-respect. Can't say the same for Jenna. Last I heard, she's still trying to rewrite that book. Good luck with that. Maybe she can write about how she upped her marriage and lost everything. At least that's a story she knows by heart.